Hi, I'm Femi OK, and you're in the stream. Today, protests over the price of power in Armenia, or the power of protest. We'll hear more about Armenians mobilizing for change in their country. There's so many times where we've done protests and there's usually a massive big hashtag associated with that protest. Today is no different. Digital producer Malika Blau will know all about that. Yeah. What can you tell us?
Well, a few days after this electricity hike in Armenia was announced, one Armenian took to Twitter in protest. I want you to take a look at this map. You can see that hashtag. This is how it started with that hashtag electric Yerevan. You can see how far it spread across the globe. And each of the yellow dots on this map shows how intense people were tweeting in that area. It has more than 67,000 uses since last week, and the originator of the hashtag will be on today's show. So you can send us your questions for him or your questions on this in general with hashtag AJStream.
My name is Roman Dobrokhotov. I'm an independent journalist and political activist, and I'm in the stream.
In Armenia, what started as a protest over rising electricity prices has, over the past few days, evolved into a demonstration about dignity. Nearly 2 weeks ago, the government announced an energy price hike of 17%. And for economically struggling Armenians, that was just too much. Protesters set up barricades and blocked a main avenue in the capital city, Yerevan. The government has since conceded and says it will suspend the energy tax for the time being. Yet demonstrators have refused to leave and promised to continue their fight for a government that works in the people's interest. And online, Armenians are mobilizing under the hashtag, as Malika said, hashtag electric Yerevan. So today we want to look at how the electric Yerevan movement is changing Armenia. With us to discuss this from Yerevan, we have Bobkin de Grigorian, an activist and protester who started the electric Yerevan hashtag. Haik Yan is Deputy Minister of Armenia's Ministry of Energy and Natural Resources. And Maria Tartesian is a managing editor of the news website Civil Net. So good to have you here, everybody. Maria, can you give us a sense of if energy went up 17%, what that would do to the average Armenian?
Well, certainly, I just make one correction. It wasn't suspended. The president of the country said that the government would shoulder the burden of the rate hike until an audit was conducted. And I think that's what has led the movement to keep going forward. And certainly 17% is going to impact people's lives. I mean, it will impact the cost of living, and already 30% of the population live in poverty. It would be a huge burden.
Bobkin, what was it about this price hike, this suggested price hike by the government that brought people out on the streets? Why was this the tipping point?
Well, this isn't the only tipping point that has happened in Armenia. This was just the latest tipping point, and it's the latest one that just made a lot of noise. But for the last few years, every time the government has tried to do something like this, so in the past it was also transport fares, people have come out to the street. The government is just not able to push things like this forward anymore without having massive resistance by the population. And in the past, the last mobilizations that have happened, the people have been successful to be able to push back. So that is what I think encouraged a lot of people to come out for this one, because they already have, they feel like they can win it. That's why.
You know, we asked our community, because so many people from Armenia are tweeting us, we wanted to know what their daily life was like and how much of a hardship this price hike might pose for them. This is one of the answers we got. This is from Mikhail. He says, my everyday life is almost the same, but I'm really proud of recent developments on the street. So I want to go to you with that, Maria, and I wonder if that's because the majority of people tweeting who have access to Twitter, mobile phones, and that kind of communication are not as affected, and who have you been talking to who might be more affected?
It's interesting because the people initially who were out on the street aren't the people who necessarily couldn't afford to pay the hike. Because this isn't, as I said earlier, this isn't necessarily about the electricity rate hike. This is about the process. This is about accountability. This is about mismanagement by a Russian-managed company, incurring massive debt, and then the citizens being asked to shoulder that burden. So that's what was very interesting. The younger, tech-savvy generation, the very small middle class that Armenia currently, these were the people who were initially out on the streets, and that's why it found such great resonance, I think.
I'm just going to have a look at CivilNet. This is Maria's website here, and you can see live pictures here of what's going on in the protests right now. It seems very calm, very relaxed. Deputy Minister, did you have any idea that if you said we need to put a tax on energy, it needs to go up 17%, that you would end up with people out on the street?
Of course, we consider that. I mean, any price increases in the tariffs is always met with a lot of resistance, and we consider this as a social issue. And when you ask what impact does this hike have on the people, and we have estimated the impact, and we have come up with a subsidy package for the poor to subsidize the extra cost that the poor would incur as a result of this price hike. But generally, we consider this as a social issue, and we do comply with a lot of that is being said by the youth gathered in the street. But I would like to ensure everybody that the government has been doing a lot, that the government is doing a lot to prevent the future hikes and to try to understand the claim of the people. And I think the government has been very open and has come halfway to meet the demands of the protesters by suspending the price hike for the people, by taking the burden on the government, and
Deputy Minister, take a breath for a moment, because as you're speaking,
if I could just
audit to find out the doubt.
All right, so Deputy Minister, just give me a moment, because as you're speaking, Maria was saying it's not suspended. Bobkin is looking very sceptical. Let's start with Bobkin first of all, because then we can get you all
No,
speaking.
it's not suspended. No.
If I may.
No, it's not suspended. It's for the time being. For the time being, the government will take the burden of the extra 7 drams that has been increased until the results of the international audit are presented. And we do hope that the results of the international audit will be acceptable by all parties, because the government has invited participants from civic society, from members of the members of the people who started this campaign, and we are going to invite the best auditors to audit not only
I'm sorry,
the
I need to jump in here.
electricity company, not only the grid company, but also the regulator.
I think the Deputy Minister's comments right now are actually indicative of what the problem is. I don't think he fully is grasping what the movement is about if he is talking about this being purely a social issue, or he's talking about this being the solution to this is not to subsidize from the budget, because the budget is also filled by the taxpayers, by the citizens. So either way, it comes from the Armenian citizens. Subsidizing from the budget is not the solution, and the fact that the Deputy Minister hasn't been able to understand that, I think shows that what is really at the heart of the problem, which is that the government is really out of touch with what the real issues in Armenia are. People are not out on the street only because
real
of the
issues
fare
like
hike.
what, Bobkin?
Transparency and accountability. I mean, I'm actually really glad that the Deputy Minister decided to show up on the program today, because it's usually very difficult to get any sort of proper commentary from the government on issues like this. When we're talking about accountability, just today, the Prime Minister said that, well, it won't be from the budget, it'll be from some other source. What is that source?
What
Where
do
does
you,
that come from?
and slow down a little bit, because the world is trying to keep up with you here, and this is an issue that's
Sure.
been fermenting in Armenia for some time. So it won't be from what source? What are we talking about here?
Well, exactly. That's exactly the question. The prime minister announced that the money would not come from the budget today, or suggested that it would not. But we don't know where it's going to come.
The money to cover from where the energy needs in terms of the tax.
Exactly. Well, the money to cover the debt that the company has accrued through mismanagement.
Right. All right,
So,
Maria.
Can I just jump in here for 1 second and just give a little bit of a backstory and context for our viewers who are joining us?
Please do. I'm going to do one at a time, everybody. I'm going to come back to you, Deputy Minister. Maria, go ahead.
When on June 17, the Public Services Regulatory Commission unanimously approved the rate hike presented to them by the Electric Network Armenia company, which is a Russian-managed company, this set into motion a series of events. The sit-in, the march to Pagramian Avenue. On June 27, the president of Armenia made an announcement, which the deputy minister alluded to, that they would conduct an international audit, and until that audit was concluded, the government would shoulder the burden. A day later, or 2 days later, the prime minister of Armenia said that the funds that they to cover the subsidy wouldn't come from the budget, yet he did not name where that money would be coming from, whether they would have to get another foreign loan in order to cover this huge expense that the government is now trying to shoulder to ease the movement on the street. So this is what the problem is, that we felt, the people felt, that this was an insult to their intelligence by saying that we will subsidize it, because the budget is not a discretionary fund for the president or the prime minister or the government. It is an operational budget that comes from our tax money.
All right. So I'm going to push things on a little bit, because this conversation is not just the three of you; it's amongst our community as well. Just everybody, just give me a pause for a moment. We'll all come back to all of you. I promise you, Malika.
Well, one thing that these protests have done is noted here by Yeshik. He tweets in, "This protest is a gradual development of civil society in Armenia. The demonstration is clearly a sign of new consciousness in the youth." And so echoing that point really is this video comment from a protester in Yerevan. I want you all to have a listen to what Tativ had to say.
Hello, it's Natevik from Yerevan, Armenia. Behind me is Pagramian Avenue. A proposed compromise by President Sarkisyan, which included suspending the price hike and subsidizing until an audit was done, has been rejected by the protesters. Tensions have been rising between the protesters and police. Police keeps denying that they'll be using force. At the same time, they have asked the protesters to remain silent after 11 p.m. Otherwise, the water machines will be used. This morning, two men have announced that they started a hunger strike. However, the movement Electric Yerevan right now does not have a clear direction.
So Maria, she had a lot to say in that video comment. The things that I picked up on are that two people are actually starting a hunger strike on this. Meanwhile, some protesters have said, we've gotten some concessions from the government, so let's go home. So what do protesters want, and is that very clear?
It isn't clear at this point. I think that because this protest was nonpartisan, because it wasn't an established political party, an opposition party, an established NGO that was leading the movement, it was a group of civic initiatives, concerned citizens coming together, and they tried to lead the movement, using consensus. So there was no clear leadership. Once the president made the announcement, there were some that said that, okay, this is a concession, let's fall back, regroup, and take the movement to a new level. That's where we stand at the present moment. I mean, there are still hundreds and thousands of people, not thousands, hundreds and thousands of people who are coming out every night. But it needs to have a clear direction. It needs to know what the target is and how they're going to move it forward.
Deputy Minister, how are you going to work with the protesters?
Yeah, I would just like to talk about on the alternatives of the government as when considering the responses to the protests. First of all, we have the responsibility to keep the energy system safe and secure, and we have to basically make it clear that it was not the all the price hike that the grid company asked for. They asked for 17 dram and they were granted 6.93 drum price hike. So it's not like the state takes everything that the grid company gives to them for granted. But we do know about the objective reasons that might have caused the price hike. We have an independent regulator that controls.
All right, so Deputy Minister, I'm going to push you a little bit. I'm going to push you a little bit, Deputy Minister, because I don't want to get stuck on this price hike, this price raise. My specific thing to you was, how are you going to work with the protesters? Are you intending to work with them, or are you going to carry on as usual?
Today, for example, I looked at the different focus groups that were formed to understand where the protest will be, in what direction the protest will be going to, because the people that are gathered in Bagramian, from what we can see, do not have a clear direction, do not have a clear leadership. Although there is good organization among them, they have focus groups to try to discuss different issues, but just I mean, looking at the names of the focus groups and how they were divided, I didn't see an energy focus group. There is no discussion about the energy system. I mean, everything started from the energy system. People demanded more transparency in the energy system. People demanded more independence in the energy system. It all started from energy, but now it seems that this topic has faded away. And if this is about energy, we can sit down and talk about energy. If this is about a social issue, if this is a social issue, then
it's about it's a socioeconomic issue, and there is an economic working group which you're more than welcome to participate in. But the issue here is that even the fact that so Armenia's energy or electricity network, the company has, Armenia has the highest fares in the entire CIS. The company has increased fares 4 times since 2009.
Now let me just not agree with that, because the tariffs that are quoted most of the time do not even have facts behind it. I mean, I looked at a lot of the social media coverage on the tariffs of the ex-CIS countries.
Bob, just give me a moment, because when you're both speaking at the same time, nobody can actually hear you.
It is not
Deputy Minister, just give me a moment. I know that our community want to join in as well. Just give me a moment so that they can do that. Malika, go ahead.
Well, they're actually picking up on what the Deputy Minister had to say. This is Holia, who writes in, part of this is not having a diversified energy sector. The other part, though, and I can see you nodding your head, Maria, the other part of this tweet, she says, though, is too much dependency and reliance on Russia in many areas. That's something that's been echoed a lot of times. This next tweet is Antun, who says, how much do these protests have to do with the fact that the Armenian energy market is under almost exclusive Russian control? And of course, that's this person's view there. So Maria, since you are shaking, nodding your head there, you want to pick up on that?
You know, I don't know. I don't have facts or figures at my disposal at this particular moment. I'm not sure how many countries there are like Armenia that have, if not sold off or given the management of their natural resources away. The problem that we have with foreign investment or foreign managed companies coming in, you know, from communications to rail links to the airport, is that there's no diversification. Armenia's energy sector is almost wholly dependent upon Russia. And so when a Russian managed company has accumulated debt through poor mismanagement, and when there have audits done by Ernst & Young, when the World Bank has issued reports, when there is continuing losses taking place, my question to the Deputy Minister is, what kind of regulations or oversight were put into place to ensure that this particular company, Armenia Electric Network Armenia, was working properly? Because at the end of the day, as a citizen of Armenia, I need to make sure that my energy system is secure, that it's affordable. When I look at the cost of living and how much money I earn and how much money I have to pay for my electricity bill, not to discount every other bill that I pay, how does the government expect the people of Armenia to be able to carry on when there is mass migration out of the country? When I said earlier 30% people live in poverty, when there's extreme polarization, both social and economic. So this is my question. Is there regulation or oversight to ensure that these foreign companies
I understood. Can I respond to the, finally, an energy question.
And please respond,
Can I respond,
Deputy
please?
Minister, please do. Go ahead.
First of all, about the dependence. I agree that our energy system is heavily dependent upon imported fossil fuels. Our energy mix is quite diversified, and we have the third of our generation through nuclear power plant. We have the third of
Deputy
it
Minister, Ministry of Energy and Natural Resources in Armenia. There's a little bit of a gap. I'm going to interrupt you for a moment here. What regulations have been put in place? I have less than a minute left in this part of the show, so if you could be very direct, it would be very helpful.
The regulations are very clear and are very transparent. I mean, there is an independent regulatory body that regulates the whole energy system. That started from small hydropower plant tariff to the distribution tariff to everything. The regulatory system is very clear. Our law on energy is very clear. It's public. It's translated into Russian and English. Our regulatory system is very open, and that is one of the reasons why we had a lot of foreign investment into Armenia. And we do see that there is, of course, a majority of the foreign investment is Russian investment, but that doesn't mean that we don't have other investment. Just recently, one of the biggest hydropower cascades was acquired by an American company called Contour Global.
May I ask a question?
And we're trying to diversify our energy system through not only having investors.
And Deputy Minister for Ministry of Energy and Natural Resources, just give me a pause for a moment. We have more to talk about. I'm going to take you, Maria Tizian, and Bobkin de Grigorian. I'm going to take you all to our post show at stream.aljazeera.com because we haven't finished this conversation by any means. But right now, here's Malika with a look at some of the other stories the stream is following.
We start in Spain, where Spaniards are also taking to the streets in protests on the day a controversial public security law comes into effect. Many, including Amnesty International, fear the law that sets fines for unauthorized protests will restrict freedom of speech, assembly, and information. Well, before the law came into force at midnight on Wednesday, Greenpeace protesters hung banners, you can see it here, reading "Protest is a right" on construction cranes over Parliament. Thousands use #GagLaw to share images like this, which reads, "Today is a great day for fascism in Spain." And this one, which reads, "Today, the day we remember how the gag law was rained down." Next to Nigeria, where women and men are speaking out against sexism with #BeingFemale in Nigeria. Used close to 60,000 times so far, it was started 3 days ago by members of a book club who were inspired by Nigerian author Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie's pamphlet, "We Should All Be Feminists." Well, Stephanie shares, when you leave a bad relationship and people ask, why didn't you endure it? And Khaleesi tweets, it's tipping the restaurant worker with your money, but the worker thanks your male companion instead. Finally, in the U.S., officials are investigating a series of fires at predominantly black churches, prompting many to ask, who is burning black churches? While investigators say some were caused by arson, many shared their suspicions and debated if the fires were hate crimes. Well, some, like Bryn, referenced the history of attacks on black churches in the U.S., while Kareem said most know who's responsible, but they're failing to act against the perpetrators. Well, this story was sent to us by community member Aminu. You can send us your story as well with #AJStream. Ami?
Thank you very much. I like #BeingFemale in Nigeria. I have a feeling there's a show in there somewhere.
I think there is. Really good tweets.
Yeah, talking about a show, let me tell you about tomorrow's show. We're going to be talking to young Greeks about how their country's debt crisis is affecting their lives. Stay with us. We're heading to the post show. Hopefully see you there. Stream.aljazeera.com. Thanks for watching. Hello again, this is the Streams Online Post Show. We're talking about Armenia's ongoing electricity protests, so who better to talk to than the Deputy Minister from the Ministry of Energy and Natural Resources. So Haik, you were in mid-conversation, we were heading towards the end of the show. Can you just pick up your thought, finish your thought, where were we?
Yeah, want to explain in a couple of words regarding the dependence of Armenia in energy sector. Of course we are dependent because we don't have natural gas, we don't have coal, we don't, and that's why we have to import our energy. We have a very good hydro resource that we're trying to utilize to its utmost capacity, and that's why the third of our generation, electricity generation, comes from hydro. We could not have promoted the solar and wind power to this day because to this day our calculations showed that if we provided a cost recovery feed-in tariff for renewable in solar and wind, the price would be too high. Hence, it would have a very negative
Deputy
impact.
Minister, if you had this conversation with people who are protesting in Yerevan right now, do you think they would even understand what you were talking about? If you had this conversation, the conversation that you're having with us here internationally, if you had it with people on the street, would they understand that, do you think?
Can I just jump in?
I have very high opinion of the people that are gathered there, and of course I'm sure if it is explained right, they would understand, and it's the fact that would they want to listen. We have ways and we have been working very hard in order to keep the electricity price down, and I would like to just once again emphasize that any price hike that has happened in the past 3 years was not as a result of mismanagement of the grid, was not the result of the corruption, it was a result of factors that were independent from the energy system and independent from us. If one could just remember what our consumption was 4 or 5 years ago and what it is right now, and one could just remember the import natural gas price 4 or 5 years ago and to what it is now, they would understand where the main difference comes from. If our electricity market is now at 42% provided by thermal power plants, which use
Deputy Minister, I do not want to turn this into a total energy conversation about energy in Armenia. It's part of the conversation, but not the whole conversation. And I know that there are many people in Armenia who are totally in disagreement with you. So let me just push things on a little bit, because there's something else that Electric Yerevan kind of started off. Malika, you have that.
Right, which is the emergence, really, of the civil society who are making their voices heard. This is one tweet from Armenians for Palestine, who writes, "The protests have created a new generation of activists who reject monopoly of power and police violence. It's a people-powered democracy." This is another tweet from Sophia, who says, "Armenians are resisting corruption of government. They're resisting severe economic oppression and foreign control of basic resources." So, Bobkin, that's a whole lot of things to be out on the streets demanding. But do you think that this has woken up something in people?
So it's something that's been waking up for a while. And I think if we look at what the actual demands of this particular mobilization are, they are rooted in the idea of transparency and accountability. Both in terms of the fare hike, but also in terms of the police repression that we witnessed during the first couple of days of the sit-in, and as well as.
Bobkin, I'm going to say that what I saw was unlike other protests that we've seen across Europe. We are not looking at a death toll. We're looking at people who were arrested and then released. I mean, this is like, if you were going to have a protest that had results, this is almost like a fantastic template.
I mean, I disagree. Did you not see the images of the water cannon? And I saw
the water cannon. I didn't see any deaths. I didn't see beatings. But I wasn't in every space.
Thankfully, there weren't deaths, and I don't think it would get to that at this point. However, there were unlawful arrests, and there was excessive force.
Right.
And journalists were also apprehended.
Targeted.
targeted and apprehended. Their cameras were taken and stolen. People were held in detention for longer than the amount of time that they're allowed to by law. The police that went after the protesters were not or have not been held to account.
So is this a strong voice of civil society or not? Because you're telling us things that have already happened. What we're really intrigued by is, why is this different? You told us in the beginning of the show, Armenia is now different. That's what civil society can do, perhaps. What's your take?
Right. Well, this is, like I said, this has been something that's been happening for a while, and it is this awakening of the identity of the Armenian citizen and the responsibilities and the rights that come as an Armenian citizen. And there you really see this disconnect between public policy in Armenia and public opinion in Armenia. And more, I mean, this is we're talking about electricity today. Yeah. We could very well be talking about petrol. We could be talking about pensions. We could be talking about
what's
transport.
Specifically Armenian about that? Because you could say that for anywhere in the world. Here's public policy, here's public opinion. That's almost everywhere, right? Every land, everywhere.
I'm not suggesting that this is an exclusively Armenian thing. What I'm suggesting is that in Armenia, what is happening is that people are not okay with such a wide separation between public opinion and public policy. Furthermore, it's the broken electoral system that doesn't allow us to fix that. The Republican Party of Armenia, of which the deputy minister works for the government, has been in power, has been a part of government since independence, has never been in opposition. The electorate, they're
can I just correct that? I'm not from any political party. So
I didn't say you are, but you
do not make this about politics, please.
I'm sorry, but it's not about politics. It is about governance.
It's about governance. Bob, let me hear from Maria, because we've heard a lot from you. Maria, go ahead. Pick up.
Okay, I think that at the top of the show, Patken said something that he needed to return to, that Armenia has been changed irreversibly. I don't want to talk about the politics or the violence, because violence isn't necessarily physical. It's economic, it's social, it's political. The awakening of the Armenian citizen, of the understanding of the rights and responsibilities of citizenship, I think are now at a level that we haven't seen since independence. This is reminiscent of the 1988 movement, the Qarabağ movement. Solidarity, there's camaraderie, there's people handing out food. It has been, by and large, a very peaceful movement. Police used excessive use of force, but then they have pulled back. Now both sides have dug in and are just playing a waiting game at this point. But I do want to say that this generation, they are fearless. They will no longer tolerate the kind of intransigence that the government for the last 23, 24 years of independence has been, sort of giving us. So this, whether or not the electricity rates are clawed back, whether or not the government subsidizes it from now till, at 20 years, Armenia has changed. The next time that the government tries to make any kind of policy change without public debate, without accountability, without transparency, they are going to be faced with this kind of public outcry. And they should be prepared for this. Right. And for me,
and if I could just clarify,
has been successful.
All right, Bobkin, I need to squeeze in one more guest comment here from our online community. Malika, go ahead.
And I'm going to direct these to the Deputy Minister. These are a couple of things that have picked up on what Bobkin and both Maria have said, this gap between public opinion and governance, public opinion and their public officials. This is Mark, who says, so far on AJ Stream, we can see that the government in Armenia has no understanding of the movement. And this next person, Lara, says, the real issue here is that there is zero trust towards this government and in the way that they manage any sector. So, Haik, what would your response be to these people?
My response would be that we do understand the protests. It's just that we're limited in the actions that we could take right now, and I do accept the criticism in the aspect that we have not been very open in what we have been doing in our PR efforts. I mean, we have been open and we have invited the media, but we haven't been very active in the PR. And let's be frank here. I mean, talking about infrastructure development is not the hottest topic that people would like to speak about unless there is something like a tariff increase. So it is very difficult to engage the public in any of the discussions. I mean, for example, in the past year and a half, we had an intergovernmental, interagency working group working on the losses of the electricity grid company and came up with a very comprehensive plan on how to reduce the losses in the next few years. And the plan is in action, the plan is working, and we have invited the media representatives in the presentation of this plan, and we had very limited feedback from the public. But when there is a price hike, when there is something this public, everybody starts speaking about it. So you have to understand from the government's point of view that we are trying to be good in the public relations, but talking about infrastructure is not the hottest topic sometimes.
We're almost at the end of the show. Please finish your thought. I'll let you finish your thought without Maria and Bobkin talking over you. Go ahead.
And yeah, thank you very much for letting me finish. And we are trying to publicize what we're doing in this sector. And solving the issue of public trust in the government is not the matter of 1 week or 2 weeks or even 3 weeks. It's a very long and very difficult job. And by staying on the streets for as long as they want to, I mean, this is not going to solve the issue. They're not going to gain trust towards the government within the next week. Let's invite the international auditors. Let's have a comprehensive audit together with the participation from the civic society, and let's agree that we will all agree to the conclusions of the audit, and we will all solve this big issue of the mistrust in this system, and that people will actually see that this system is actually managed and is actually okay, basically. All right,
okay, so I'm going to wrap up the show, Bobkin, here, but I'm really curious as to what would make you leave the streets?
Look, we may leave the street today, we may leave the street a few days from now. This is just the latest mobilization. Our demands are very clear. The government knows what they are. The fee increase is not acceptable. But I think what really needs to be highlighted here is that the problems of accountability and transparency are so entrenched in Armenia that it's not about who the president or what agency we're talking about. It's about the fact that the institutions themselves are not accountable, regardless of what we're talking about. And as long as that persists, you're going to keep seeing more and more mobilizations like this.
Sure. All right, so that was Bobkin de Gregorian. We had also Maria Titsian and also Deputy Minister Haik Halut Yunyan. Thank you so much for being with us in our conversation today. Let me just finish up with our online community and Malika.
I was really enjoying reading some of their tweets. They're all watching live, and some really good points here, but I'll end this from this one. Anastasia writes in, no matter what the result is, people are going to feel strength in their unity, that it's them who may change the course of events, and of course we'll be watching.
All right, thank you very much, everybody, for being part of this conversation. On the next AJ stream, we're going to be talking to young Greeks about what's happening in their country. If you'd like to join in that conversation, #AJ stream. See you next time.